Hello. Okay, I had said in a previous video that I was going to get around to talking about custom guitars and stuff. I'm not quite there yet. Still doing some research and things. But I'll touch on it a little bit in this video since it kind of ties in with some other things I had started to say in the previous video and then stopped short because it was already running super long and chances are you didn't watch it anyway, but if anybody sees this one after that one, I was talking about the David Gilmour guitar had sold, and then the Kurt Cobain acoustic guitar sold for more, and then I was talking about some of the guitars that I've bought and sold over the years, mostly 15 or 20 years ago when I was kind of going through a guitar collector phase and then kind of stopped. Typically for me, like if something broke a string, I would sell it rather than bother to restring it, I guess. If I knew I wasn't going to, play it that much anyway. Like I had a classical guitar that I think cost $80, or maybe it cost 100 and I sold it for 80, something like that, because it was missing a string, that kind of thing. But I wasn't really learning classical guitar. I just liked the sound of the nylon strings. So it was kind of like, I don't need it, And so I don't know if I need to comment too much on acoustic guitars. I've never really performed a lot with acoustic guitars except for, going out to the street to practice and people throw money in the bucket anyway. Like I wasn't really performing so much as just shamelessly trying to make this profitable instead of sitting at home by myself, I guess. So maybe the title of this video should be busking when you don't really busk, I guess. Like, I would literally start playing a song when people would walk up, and if they threw me some change, I would like wait till they were out of earshot and then stop playing. Then when the next people came up, I would start playing the same song again. I may have, mentioned this in a previous video, but I'd never memorized a lot of songs anyway, so unless I had some books with me or something, I was just kind of fiddling around with stuff I was, already familiar with. So yeah, I don't know how much, quality I can. Obviously, there's very super expensive acoustic guitars, and like the Kurt Cobain one, obviously that is because he owned it. The girl who bought it for him probably wasn't very rich at the time, and it probably wasn't in very good condition when he got it, or else how else he's got these unknown pre-rock stars get a hold of expensive equipment is usually because it wasn't expensive, unless he was already a rock star at the time. I don't know the whole story, but I doubt it. So I was saying, I was asking, is it easier to pick out Gibson custom options or hunt for vintage models? Like I said, I haven't finished with that tangent. And so then I had left off to say, yeah, I don't really need to comment much on acoustic guitars. I might do another video in the future. There was a while there when I really wanted an Ovation, and I just couldn't bring myself to buy it because, again, I wasn't performing live, so I didn't really need a guitar with pickups and an amp, although I kind of liked the idea of having that option where I could play it acoustic or I could turn it louder if I wanted to play with drums, but I never ended up playing with drums with an acoustic guitar, so it never ended up mattering. So yeah, I literally have a cheap one here from Sam Ash that has been around for, like I said, about 20 years, and it's held up pretty well. And I think it's still in tune, even though I haven't touched it in, not quite, almost. I haven't touched it in a couple of weeks though. But yeah, I think this one cost me like 120. I think this was still in that. Maybe would that be closer to 300 now? Ish, I don't know. But nowhere near $3,000 like a Martin, or that Ovation. I think the Ovations were like 800 at the time or something. And around that time, I think I bought the Epiphone Hollow Body, where I already did the dot video last week. Anyway, it was all, like I said, it was all around that same timeline, and I sold three. I sold the Yeah, I sold the Affinity Strat, I sold the Squire P bass, and I sold the Black Classical one. So the only one that gives me the trouble, like I said, is the Epiphone Dot because it already had the messed up pots, I think. I mentioned this before. Anyway, speaking about relics and stuff, yeah, so the current trend is to like beat up your guitars. I mean, after 20 years, it has this chip in it. It has that chip in it. It has a couple chips there, and those are recent too. I was really upset with myself when I did those. It's got some little chips down here. Obviously, I put stickers on it way back when, which are just silly. I think there's a few more there that are possibly recent. So yeah, if you don't beat up your equipment, it won't look that beat up. I mean, obviously, again, I don't have a case for this guitar. So even when I've taken it out to the streets and played on concrete planters or bus benches or whatever on the rare occasion, there's a little dust here in the headstone. It still doesn't get mangled if you're not throwing it around. So I don't know why people pay extra to have a guitar that looks more beat up. I'm not quite there yet. The one guy was saying that he sometimes likes that Relic because then he doesn't have to worry about it. If he takes it to a gig at a dive bar, or maybe not quite a dive bar, but just any regular gig, he doesn't have to worry about getting any cosmetic damage. Okay, fine. But typically they won't anyway, unless you're really careless, absent-minded, drunk. Like, how hard is it to keep a guitar looking halfway decent? Literally every other product in the world loses value with wear and tear. So I don't know how guitars can suddenly be more valuable. I think when they unearth a vintage one, most people want to see how pretty it is, not how beat up it is. So buying a new one that's beat up to look more beat up than a vintage one that you wouldn't pay that much for it if it was but they're still going to be cheaper than a vintage one in whatever condition most of the time, unless, like I said, it's so beat up that Kurt Cobain's girlfriend can afford it before he becomes Kurt Cobain. Then now it's the most expensive guitar in the world, even though it still looks like a beat up old Martin to me. I don't know. Sold at a Beverly Hills auction for $5 million after buyer's premium and related expenses. Am I reading this? 6,100,000, the grand total, to Peter Friedman, co-founders of Rode Microphones, which I consider likely a total ripoff for the condition, but Kurt Cobain used it for one song or something. I don't know. Who am I to judge? There are other collector's items that I would like to buy, but I don't know that I would pay that much for them. So yeah, this went on about 3 minutes longer than I thought it would. And so I guess we'll leave that here for now.